Welcome back to another episode of The Hardcore Casual with your boy, Base the Kid. As always, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, a colleague, a relative, an immediate family member, an associate, an enemy, anyone in between. I think I'm about 40 away from that big 1K number, so I need a friend to tell two more, etc, etc. You know how it goes. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. As always, you know why you're here. I don't normally drop videos on a Tuesday due to other commitments. However, I thought today was a bit too good to not give my take. But before I get into that, I just want to address a couple other quick things that have kind of taken place over the last day or so, last couple of days, and then yeah, we'll get into the meat and bones of it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So following Jerome Miller's 6th round KO of Lucas Brown over the weekend, Dillian Whyte tweeted out on Twitter basically saying Miller is so shit. Now, in that term, you might think, okay, if Dillian is speaking about people, normally it's people that he may have an interest in fighting or, you know, testing the water, seeing what's going on. He's an opinionated person, but these days it's more like he'll only really speak about someone if he's potentially having a look to see, okay, yeah, can I get that fight on? Now, where this kind of gets interesting is, so far Jerome Miller, from what I've seen, hasn't responded. I don't particularly follow him, but it would have passed my line of view if he had said something. But the person who has basically jumped in the running is Michael Hunter. Essentially said something along the lines of like, Dillian, you can't talk, or something along those lines. And now, so that's leading to speculation that, you know, that could end up being a future opponent for Dillian Whyte, potentially on that June date, which is taking place in London. So far, we've got a couple fights announced for that. It's been heavily rumored that it will be a Dillian Whyte fight night, although it hasn't been confirmed. Eddie Hearn did say that that's not actually been confirmed just yet. But that would be, if that was an opponent for Dillian Whyte, I feel like that's probably the wrong type of opponent at this point. I've always said, like, if he's gonna be fighting the bigger guys, his opponents need to be of the stature of the current people that are either the champions or in mandatory like positions to be the champions. Now, as much as I like Michael Hunter, and I do, even with the recent inactivity and the whole situation with Filip Hrgovic and the IBF and all of that, you know, a 6'2", fairly nimble heavyweight, small heavyweight, you know, who can, I guess, still make cruiserweight if he really wanted to, is not the type of opponent that best benefits Dillian Whyte, especially as he needs to be set to throw those shots. Someone like Michael who can stick and move, you know, basically raid the pocket and all of that. It's a very unnecessary night's work for someone like Dillian, especially if you are hoping to land a big stadium fight with Anthony Joshua, I guess towards the back end of the summer, or however that may play out. Although I probably would guess that those talks are now done with, because if Joshua's fighting in April and Dillian's fighting in June, supposedly, there's no way that they're going to be able to fight each other in the summer. And if AJ, who has been touted to have 3 fights this year, doesn't fight between, I guess, July, August, absolute earliest, like the first week of September, then there's absolutely no chance of getting a third fight in, unless you have 2 lower level ones and then you do that one later on in the year, or have another warm-up type fight at the end of the year. I don't know, but yes, I just thought, in terms of, you know, that little triple threat round robin, that's a very interesting cycle. Just wanted to throw that out there. Leave your comments down below and let me know what you think with regards to that situation. So, in addition to the Manny Pacquiao callouts of Conor Benn, which is something that could be taking place in the UAE sort of around about the June time, and obviously Conor and Kell Brook was going back and forth on Twitter not too long ago, a couple of days back, and obviously you still have the Chris Eubank Jr. stuff going on as well. Kell Brook looks like he's gone off to Fuerteventura as he normally does to do some warm weather training. They say they're starting the training camp, and they tagged Conor Benn in the in the post. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily saying that that would be the next thing taking place, or maybe he's just saying, well, look, I'm about to get ready, so if you need someone later on down the line, I'll be in shape. You know, if it's that sort of situation, just get some weight off now, sort of stay trim, stay lean, and then maybe do something towards the back end of the year. I mean, it makes sense, to be totally honest. I can't see it being something that happens next, because Conor Benn versus Kell Brook doesn't do any traction anywhere outside of the UK, not even in the UAE. And anyone who saw Monday Night Smoke yesterday will know exactly why I say it won't do anything in the UAE. But yeah, if he can get his license back in the UK, maybe towards the back end of the year, that's definitely a situation that could yield some promising results. It's not necessarily the fight I would want to see, but you know, if you're gonna just, I guess, put Conor down on this, you know, this superstar, just fight big names type person now and forget about belts, which is what it kind of looks like it's about to amount to, that's not a bad way to go. And Kell Brook at a decent weight, so not a 147, 148, 149 type. If we're talking maybe 154 to about 157, 160, anywhere in between there, that's a fight that causes all kinds of problems for Conor Benn and teaches him a lot as well. So even if he wins, he takes a lot out of it. But yeah, in terms of the energy, I mean, look, it's good that for Kell's current mental space and his happiness and whatever, that he's getting back, you know, to being active, maybe with the promise of just having that one more night that he wants. I support it, and I support anyone doing whatever it takes to like get themselves in a happy place. And if this happy place is training for a fight, whether he has the fight or not, I'm with it. So yeah, let's see what kind of happens with that moving forward. But now, look, we all know why we're here, and mentioning Conor Benn just a moment ago is a brilliant segue into Eddie Hearn versus Simon Jordan, which took place earlier on TalkSport. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to watch this live and tweet about it live as well. I think overall they had, I guess what they would call it, 6 rounds. There were 6 different conversations. Now, the first round, before any points were even mentioned, like, it got spicy from Simon Jordan's side. Like, he came out mad aggressive on some mad vim just to start off with, where he was talking about, you know, Eddie essentially being a coward of the situation, not a coward in character. He was very clear to state that, not a coward overall, but within the situation, acting cowardly, saying that how he didn't want to go onto our platform because he knew he couldn't get around the questions. He had nothing to say. He knew he'd get, you know, brutalized for lying or whatever. And this is before he'd even asked any questions or made any points. He just came out, you know, just throwing hands unprovoked. At this point, you know, you think to yourself, okay, you want to kind of lure the person in a little bit, make them a bit comfortable, and then attack them. But no, he just went for the jugular. He said, like, this is what you're here for. Like, it's the smoke that the fans want, it's the smoke that the audience want. Like, they're gonna get that. And at that point, when that first started taking place, first thing I thought to myself, whoa, okay, like, yeah, not that Eddie made a mistake, but yeah, you may not come out of this one looking how you want to look, because like, Simon ain't playing no games, and realistically, Jim White's not gonna totally be impartial in his judging of this situation. I mean, that's his co-host. He's got, you know, at the end of the day, you back your boy to whatever degree that you can. But you know what? Credit to Eddie Hearn. I mean, he rode all the initial storm, and I felt like he made some good points, especially when he said, look, you had the British border boxing control here, and you never came at them the same way you're coming at me right now. When Robert Smith was here, you was very like, oh, but it was Eddie. It's almost like he had that agenda with Eddie Hearn. Simon kind of saying, well, no, I asked him the same questions that you just claimed that I didn't ask. He said, yeah, but you didn't really do it in the normal Simon Jordan way. And yeah, I mean, look, we've seen enough of Simon Jordan with Spencer Oliver. We've seen enough of Simon Jordan on the TalkSport show that when he wants to just rip into someone, he does. And he didn't do that with Robert Smith. He went into that interview in a process of wanting to understand the entire situation. He pushed back, he challenged, he did what you want a good, journalist or a good, interviewer to do, to ask those tough questions and probe when the answers ain't making sense. But in this time, there was none of that. It was anytime Eddie Hearn wanted to speak, Simon jumped in, or he would counter a point that hasn't even been made at that point, or he would give a question, and then as the question is about to be answered, he would jump in and then throw another thing in there just before you can finish answering the first question. Now you're almost having to pivot on what's going on. It's an interesting tactic, and I see it does work, because for someone who isn't telling the truth, if you make them have to readjust and think enough times, by the time you go back to asking that initial question, which is what Simon did on several occasions, their answer will eventually slip and they will come out with the truth, because trying to remember the lie is too hard to do. But on every time that Simon Jordan did try that tactic with Eddie managed to, he's stuck in mode, which therefore tells me that either he is excellent at remembering a lie, or what he's saying is either the genuine truth, or he genuinely believes it's the truth. Both of those, or maybe all three of those things, can be right at the exact same time. Who knows? So round one was essentially about the issues around the actual event itself. Round two, I think, was they asked Eddie Flack, from a moral standpoint, were you right to do what, to try and keep the fight on and whatnot? And Eddie said essentially, like, I have regrets. He admitted that he had regrets of how he handled the situation on the Wednesday, saying that they was weighing up their options when he should have just said that the board done the right thing. But his whole thing came back to, they took 5 weeks to sort out this situation. Like, no one has really asked them why they took 5 weeks. Now, Simon did try to jump in and say, well, did you and Conor not slap lawsuits on them and injunctions to tell them that they couldn't speak, like cease and desist? And Eddie said, no, we've never done that. And then he categorically stated that Matchroom, and like himself and anyone within Matchroom, has never issued a cease and desist or an injunction on the board with regards to the situation. And then when Simon said, okay, but did Conor do it? Eddie said, not to my knowledge, which is very smart, because if Conor did, and you say not to my knowledge, then that can't be questioned. Maybe you legitimately don't know if he did and he actually did, but you can't be penalized for something someone else done when you two are not, at that point you're not in cahoots. So yeah, there was a lot of almost trying to tar with the same brush, but I feel where the tide started to turn and Eddie basically managed to almost pull it back, because like I said, first round was really rocky, and it was looking like Simon, basically what he was asking, the questions we all wanted to know, or what we'd thought would get asked like 6 months ago. But then there was moments and multiple points after that where Eddie Hearn has literally just said, you don't know the situation, like you literally don't know the procedures that you're talking about. Like, legally this was our position, morally doesn't come into it, in our contracts this states this. And he also said that I'm also happy to provide you with the evidence from the UCAD situation with Billy Joe Saunders back in, I think it was 2019, when the issue happened between him and Demetrius Andrade with the nasal spray, where it's allowed within UCAD outside of competition, but it's not allowed in competition, which I believe is only supposed to be within fight week or the day of the fight, or maybe within the last 2 to 3 weeks of your training. So, but then, and that whole point was to say, well, it was picked up by VADA. UCAD don't adhere to VADA. They said it was fine because outside of competition it's fine to use, but VADA picked it up, and then it was the commission, I think it was the Rhode Island State Commission, were the ones who then refused to sanction the bout because a VADA test had been failed. Now, Eddie didn't really even go into all of that information, but I know, but when you now use that as a precedent to say, well, look, the precedent is they don't accept this, and you give examples, and then Simon basically said, well, no, but that's not right. They do accept, in the term of an adverse finding, they do accept. Then Eddie counters by saying, well, hold on, if that's the case, why did they just put out a statement the other day that says, at the conclusion of this particular situation, we may have to look and address and make some changes to our rulings going forward? That clearly means that at that particular point, they've got an issue because they don't acknowledge the testing bodies that found whatever was in Conor Ben's samples. Then we had talk about the B samples. Eddie said, well, no, they were tested, and that was in the Piers Morgan interview. He stated on Piers Morgan, and he also put on Twitter that his B samples were tested without his representation present, which is a big issue. But there was a lot of times it felt like Simon Jordan wasn't actually listening to the answers. He was just looking for trigger words to push back on before actually getting to another point. So it's like he didn't have the knowledge that he needed, but all he had was conjecture, which he basically said at one point. He's like, well, it's okay for me to not even hypothesize. He said, like, to, I can't remember the word he used, surmise, I think he said, that he's surmising basically from the information that he's got. It may not have even been that word. I know it started with an S, but that's the only one I can think of at the top of my head right now. But yeah, it was a case of he was using sort of conjecture and I guess what we would think of as logic to some of his queries, but logic doesn't always dictate facts. We've all got those those kind of scenarios in our day-to-day life where common sense and logic will tell you to do this, but by the letter of the law or by the contract that you work under or whatever, that's not your process. Your process is to do it this way, and if that's where it is in the contract, then ultimately there's no way to get around that. So even though it was highly entertaining, like for an hour and a half, whatever, it ultimately didn't actually, there was no new data uncovered. It went over the same stuff, and the fact that Simon Jordan couldn't get any new data uncovered within it almost kind of tells you that he didn't really have much to say anyway, other than to just try and lambast Eddie Hearn and be like, well, you ran from us for 6 months, why did it take you so long to come here, why did it take you? And Eddie's like, well, no, I've actually been on Talksport, I just haven't been on your show because I didn't like how you was getting on. And I can kind of understand that, because Simon Jordan rubs up a lot of people the wrong way unless they're one of his friends, and even then, like, so then they might not get the same level of vigor. As I said, you look at the Robert Smith thing and you can clearly see that there was a difference in energy with how he was talking to Robert Smith when he came. It was either Talksport or it was this show with Spencer Oliver, and obviously how Eddie Hearn just there, or when Frank Warren comes on the phone or someone else like this. It's a lot more, you might probe but you ain't probing, you're not attacking at that point. So yeah, obviously they was talking about AJ, and Eddie alluded to what I think I may have stated somewhere else. Actually, no, I didn't put it out on the video, so I'm not going to say it here. But Eddie Hearn basically alluded to, they called out the bluff of Tyson Fury when it came to the contract, and they kept getting the contract. It wasn't necessarily in the greatest of states. Then all of a sudden it was hit with deadline after deadline after deadline for December, and finally said, no, forget it, it's not in a state we can do anything with, and we're not going to be dictated to, like, we don't have a fine commercial value here. Also highlighting the fact that when Tyson Fury had done the draw with Deontay Wilder and was coming in as a challenger with no belts or anything, he demanded 50-50 to fight AJ, and they said no, but then he tried to offer AJ 64 and AJ said yes. So just showing levels of contradictory behavior, which obviously we already know. Just talking through those things, talking about the ticket sales for Jermaine Franklin and Anthony Joshua. Actually, I went on there earlier because I just got sent my ticket by Craig Richards, so shout out to Craig for sorting that out for me. And I was actually looking now. even there's a lot of sections that still have tickets in, I can kind of see now that, yeah, there are a lot less seats than there were previously, but when you just look at it as a snapshot, it just looks like there's bare tickets left. I don't know how many particularly is left. I would think it's maybe about 2,000-3,000 from what I saw. Out of 20,000, that's not terrible at this juncture, but obviously for an Anthony Joshua thing, it's just not the norm, so it's just weird to see. But yeah, I mean, look, overall with regards to, you know, the interview, it was entertainment, but it didn't provide us with any further information, any further you know, admissions or any found omissions that none of us already knew. So again, it's like we set this thing up 6 months down the line, but Simon didn't have any evidence or anything to be able to put out there that would get different responses. So ultimately, as fun as it was, you could almost say it was irrelevant and it was unnecessary. But that being said, I actually hope that the two of them can you know, sort of go and join up on other times and discuss other topics, maybe outside of their own specific you know, like agendas. You know, maybe outside of Conor Ben or outside of a Matchroom thing, let Eddie give his neutral take on a different situation, and Simon vice versa, something he doesn't have as much of a personal interest in, or something to boost numbers, and we'll kind of see. Also, just I guess I have to touch on it. Eddie delivered a very scathing shot. It was a shot done very, very slyly, so people may not have caught it, towards Joshua Buatsi and his commercial viability. I'm not gonna say what it was, but if you caught it, you know exactly what I'm referring to. And I was talking to October Red on Twitter. I'm sure she saw it as well, and yeah, it was nasty. It was levels akin to what Josh was basically saying at the press conference with Boxer. And they're obviously talking about Simon Jordan. It pretty much it descended into a you know, a brutal beating at one point when Eddie started talking about the bankruptcy with Crystal Palace, and Simon's like, well, hold on, I never went into bankruptcy. Don't say things that are going to get you in trouble. He's like, oh, I apologize. Also, and then Simon goes, well, no, they went in, you know, they had to be placed in administration, and I left 50 million pounds there. And then he said, so you took them into administration? I didn't take them into administration. He's like, but you just said that that they were put into administration while you were there during the bank. So ultimately, yeah, he just walked himself into that KO shot and couldn't really recover from it. From then, the vim kind of came out of his voice a little bit. So that's where I kind of think, okay, yeah, Eddie played a blinder on that one, just making sure that ultimately you can't say nothing about my business when your business is doing certain things. Like, the moves I'm making have been nothing but successful thus far. You maybe can't really talk the same thing, so, you know, just mind how you're talking over there. And every time he kept calling him a disc jockey, I found that rather hilarious as well. But yeah, let me leave it there. I might go into a bit more detail on the breakdown, or I might just give another general talk like this when me and Tony discuss it. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and to share with a friend. Get me to that 1k, get those watch hours up so I can start doing bigger and better on the channel. And yeah, new videos coming soon. But for now, it's the Hardcore Casual out.